The sound of tearing metal and shattering glass had barely faded before the gurney burst through the trauma bay doors, its wheels screaming against the linoleum. On it lay a nightmare of blood and uniform. An old man, his face a mask of crimson, his body twisted in ways that spoke of horrific impact. But it was the jacket, slashed and stained, that caught the light. A U.S. Navy issue adorned with rows of medals that jangled a discordant, tragic tune with every bump. And over him, a young woman with blonde hair escaping her cap, her blue scrubs already smeared with his life, drove her palms into his chest with a rhythm that was both desperate and disciplined. "Stay with me, sir. Stay with me," she cried, her voice cutting through the cold, clinical air. But from the doorway, another sound pierced the chaos laughter, cruel, sharp, and utterly out of place. Two young men in matching blue and yellow varsity jackets pointed, their smiles wide and mocking, as if the struggle for life before them was the season's best entertainment. Before you wonder how this night could possibly get any more shocking, or how this rookie nurse could ever change its course, make sure you're subscribed. Join our channel, because what unfolds in the next 20 minutes is a story of justice that you will never forget. Her name was Emma Walsh, and 73 days ago, she had pinned on her nursing badge for the first time, her fingers trembling with pride. St. Augustine Hospital was a beast of a place, a sprawling urban trauma center that ate idealists for breakfast. She was from a small town in Ohio, where her mom was a school librarian and her dad fixed tractors. Nursing school had been a dream forged in the quiet hours of helping her grandmother through a long illness. A dream of making order out of chaos, of offering comfort in the void. But St. Augustine's chaos was of a different magnitude. It was loud, brutal, and often thankless. The senior nurses called the ER the pit, and the doctors moved with a wary cynicism that sometimes bordered on contempt for anything that smelled of naivety. Emma clung to her procedures, her checklists, the sacred rhythms of vitals and IVs. She was called Proby, more than her name, and her suggestions and rounds were often met with patronizing smiles or outright dismissal. Yet, she kept her head down, her heart wide open, believing that the medicine, the sheer act of caring, was the only armor she needed. The man bleeding out on Trauma Bay 3 was a John Doe when he came in. The ambulance report was frantic. Single vehicle accident, high speed, wrapped around a concrete pillar on the interstate, no ID found. But as the trauma team swarmed, cutting away the fabric, the tattoos emerged. Anchors and eagles, a ship's wheel over a heart, dates spanning decades. And the jacket, which they had to cut off him, revealed not just medals, but the specific gold threading of a star that made the attending surgeon, Dr. Khanna, pause for a half second. "Get me type and cross, 8 units now!" he barked, but his eyes lingered on the patient's grizzled face. The man was in his late 70s, but his frame was still powerful, shoulders broad even in ruin. His pulse was thready, his blood pressure plummeting. A tension pneumothorax was suspected, one lung had collapsed. Internal bleeding was a given. "Nurse Walsh, continuous compressions. Don't stop until I say," Dr. Khanna ordered, his focus already on the chest tube tray. Emma nodded, locking her arms, finding the tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4 she counted in her head, her world narrowing to the rise and fall of the sternum beneath her palms. This was not a dummy in training. This was a life, leeching away with every second. That's when the laughter started. It sliced through the focused silence of the bay like a shard of glass. Emma, drenched in sweat, flicked her eyes up. Two young men, maybe early 20s, stood just beyond the sterile line, their phones held up. They wore varsity jackets from Clayton University, a prestigious private school across town. The jackets were a vibrant blue with yellow sleeves, the letterman patches gleaming. One, tall with a cocky smirk, pointed directly at Emma. "Look at her go, Mike, like she's in some movie." The other, shorter but broader, chuckled, zooming in with his phone. "Dude, that old guy is done. What's the point?" They were clean, polished, emanating a breezy arrogance that was so alien to the desperate struggle in the room it felt like a violation. A few of the other nurses and orderlies glanced over, their faces tight with discomfort, but no one said a word. The priority was the patient. The social contract of the trauma bay, that this was sacred ground, was being broken, and everyone was too busy, too stunned, or too intimidated to enforce it. Emma felt a white, hot fury mix with her adrenaline. She wanted to scream at them, to order them out. But she couldn't stop compressions. The Admiral's. She was already thinking of him as that, though she didn't know it yet. Heart rhythm on the monitor was a deadly, wobbling line. "Get them out of here," she hissed through gritted teeth to a circulating nurse who just shook her head slightly, as if to say, "Not now." The bullies, seeing they had an audience, amplified their performance. "Come on, Grandpa, just let go," the tall one called, his voice dripping with mock encouragement. "Those medals ain't gonna help you now." The shorter one, Mike, laughed again, a harsh, braying sound. "Probably stole them anyway." Their words were arrows, each one landing in Emma's back. She focused on the man's face. Beneath the blood and bruising, it was a face of lines and storms, of sun and salt. A face that had commanded. A face that now depended entirely on her, a rookie while jackals laughed at his demise. Dr. Kana inserted the chest tube with a swift, sure motion. A hiss of air, a rush of blood. The monitor beeped erratically. "We're losing him! Walsh, harder!"
"Don't you dare stop!"
Emma poured everything into her compressions, her muscles burning. She thought of her grandfather, a Vietnam vet who never talked about the war, but whose hands always shook at fireworks. She thought of the oath she took, to advocate, to protect. The bullies' voices became a toxic buzz in her ears. "Someone should tell her CPR doesn't work when you're already that dead." One quipped. A resident, looking young and angry, finally turned. "You need to leave. Now." The tall bully, whose name tag on his jacket read Jared, just smiled. "We're family. That's our great uncle or something. We have a right to be here." It was a blatant lie. Their demeanor was all cruelty, no concern. But in the chaos, with a life hanging by a thread, security wasn't being called. The moment was too fragile. Then, the monitor flatlined. A single, relentless tone filled the room. "Azistol!" someone called out. "Charging to 200! Dr. Kana grabbed the paddles. Clear. Emma pulled her hands back, her breath catching. The body jolted. Nothing. The line remained flat. Again. Another jolt. Still flat. The team moved with practiced speed, administering epinephrine, checking connections. But the mood was sinking. In the background, Jared and Mike were practically giggling. "Told you," Mike said, not even bothering to lower his voice. Lights out. Emma looked at Dr. Kana, whose eyes were grim. They were about to call it. Time of death. This man, this sailor, this unknown hero, would die to the sound of juvenile mockery. Something in Emma snapped, not in anger, but in a profound, deep refusal. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "One more cycle, please. Let me do one more cycle of compressions." Dr. Kana hesitated. Protocol was clear. But he saw the fire in her eyes, a fire that contrasted so violently with the icy disdain of the spectators. He gave a curt nod. 1 minute, then we call it." Emma climbed back onto the step stool, placed her hands, and began again. Her arms were leaden, but her will was iron. She wasn't just pumping a heart now. She was fighting for dignity. For the idea that a life of service does not end in ridicule. She counted, she pushed, she poured every ounce of her belief into the motion. "Come back," she whispered. Only for him to hear. "Sir, come back. They don't get to win." And then a miracle, a blip, a tiny defiant spike on the monitor. Then another. "We have a rhythm." A nurse shouted. "Sinus tachycardia, it's weak, but it's there." A collective exhale swept the team. Dr. Kana's eyes widened. "Good work." "Walsh, now let's move! OR2 stat! We have a window!" The gurney was in motion, the team racing alongside it, squeezing bags of fluids, barking statuses. As they rushed past the doorway, Jared and Mike's smiles had faded, replaced by looks of vague disappointment, as if their favorite show had been canceled prematurely. Jared called out, "Where's the drama? Bring him back so we can watch him die again." Emma, running alongside the gurney, locked eyes with him for a second. She didn't say a word, but the look she gave him was not one of hate. It was one of pity, and a promise that his world was about to change in ways he couldn't fathom. The surgery was a 4-hour marathon. Emma, still running on adrenaline, assisted in the OR. They repaired a lacerated liver, a splenic rupture, and a myriad of broken bones. The anesthesiologist kept murmuring about the patient's resilience. "Heart of a lion," he said. During a quiet moment, as they waited for a lab result, a circulating nurse brought in a plastic bag containing the patient's personal effects. Among the torn clothes was a wallet. The nurse opened it, her eyes scanning the ID. She went pale. "Kana," she whispered, holding up a military identification card. This is Rear Admiral Thomas J. Sheffield, United States Navy, retired. A hush fell over the OR. Dr. Khanna let out a low whistle. The Thomas Sheffield, the one from the Gulf, the Somalia intervention. The nurse nodded, reading further. Medal of Honor recipient. Oh my God! Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the OR's temperature. The Admiral. The bullies had been mocking a national hero, a man who had saved hundreds of lives. The injustice of it burned in her gut. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Jared and Mike were growing bored. They had come to the hospital for a different reason entirely. A fraternity prank had gone mildly wrong, and a brother had gotten a minor concussion from a fall during a hazing ritual. They were waiting for his discharge paperwork. Their encounter with the trauma bay had been a chance diversion, a cruel game to pass the time. They felt no remorse. Their entitlement was a cocoon. They filmed a few more TikToks, making jokes about boomer remover and old soldiers fading away. They were oblivious to the seismic shift occurring just floors away. As Admiral Sheffield was wheeled into the surgical intensive care unit, stable but critical, the hospital administration was notified. The news traveled up the chain of command with astonishing speed. Within minutes, the hospital CEO was in the ICU, his face ashen. The Navy was being contacted. The Pentagon. This was no longer just a medical case. It was a potential international incident. Emma, cleaning up in the staff lounge, was approached by Dr. Khanna. Walsh. That was exceptional. You literally brought him back. When I tell you the Admiral's personal history, you saved a piece of living history. Before Emma could process the praise, the CEO walked in, followed by a severe-looking woman in a business suit. Emma Walsh, the CEO said. This is Ms. Vance from the Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence. She needs to speak with you. In a small, private conference room, Ms. Vance laid out the situation. Admiral Sheffield was not just a hero, he was a legend, a strategic mind still consulted by the Joint Chiefs. His accident was being treated with the utmost seriousness. And then she played security footage from the hallway outside the trauma bay. There, in clear black and white, were Jared and Mike, pointing, laughing, their words captured by the audio feed. We have identified these individuals. Ms. Vance said, her voice icy. They are not family. They are students at Clayton University. Their behavior is not just reprehensible. It is a profound dishonor to a man who has given everything for this country. The Navy wishes to pursue all available avenues, but we need a witness. You were the primary nurse. You heard everything. Emma felt a surge of vindication, but also a weight. She nodded. I'll do whatever is needed. What happened next unfolded with a speed and efficiency that felt military in its precision. At the 15-minute mark post-surgery, as Emma gave her statement to Ms. Vance, 2 uniformed naval officers arrived at the hospital. They were flanked by 2 very serious-looking men in dark suits. Secret Service, as it turned out, because the president had been briefed and was personally concerned. The Clayton University Fraternity House received a visit from the Dean of Students, the university president, and a Navy JAG officer. The fraternity's national charter was revoked on the spot. Jared and Mike, still scrolling through their phones in the waiting room, were approached not by hospital security, but by the dark-suited agents. Jared Thorne and Michael Ross, one said, "You need to come with us." The shock on their faces was the first crack in the arrogant facade. They were led to an empty family consultation room. Inside waited the dean, the university president, the JAG officer, and via a tablet video call, the chief of naval operations himself. The CNO, a 4-star admiral with eyes like flint, did not raise his voice. He simply said, "You have dishonored a man who embodies the very concept of honor. You have disgraced yourselves, your families, and your institution. Do you have any idea what Thomas Sheffield has done for you? For the freedom you treat so lightly?" He then listed a few of the Admiral's actions, leading a rescue under fire in the South China Sea, negotiating the release of hostages while a young commander, his decades of service. The tablet screen shifted to show the trauma bay footage, with their laughter as its soundtrack. Jared and Mike's bravado evaporated. They shrunk in their chairs, their faces draining of color. Back at the hospital, Admiral Sheffield regained consciousness. His first act through the tube in his throat was to scribble a note. It said, "Nurse, thank you." His second note was, "Ooh," laughed. Emma was by his bedside when he asked. She hesitated, but the Admiral's eyes, pale blue and sharp despite the drugs, demanded truth. She told him. She described the jackets, the mockery. A storm gathered in those eyes. He scribbled again. Fumiz. Vance was summoned. He pointed to the phone. She understood. She dialed a number, put it on speaker, and held it to his ear. With a rasping, barely audible voice, the Admiral said only a few words. This is Sheffield. The boys in the Clayton jackets. Handle it. 20 minutes after Emma had restarted his heart, Jared and Mike were in that consultation room, begging. The full weight of their actions came crashing down. The university president informed them they were expelled, effective immediately. All academic credits for the semester were forfeit. The JAG officer explained they were being investigated for potential violations of the Stolen Valor Act, though a more likely path was civil prosecution for intentional infliction of emotional distress and harassment. Their parents were called. Jared's father, a wealthy financier, initially tried to bluster until he learned exactly who Thomas Sheffield was and which of his business partners held the Admiral in sacred esteem. The network of influence was vast and unforgiving, but the begging wasn't just about the punishments. It was about the shame. The video footage was being prepared for release to the media, with their identities blurred but their story told. Their futures, law school for Jared, a finance career for Mike, were evaporating. They begged the dean for another chance. They begged the university president for leniency. They begged the JAG officer to drop the legal threats. We didn't know, Mike cried, tears streaming. We were just joking. The CNO's voice came back through the tablet, cold and final. The men I serve with die for the right to joke. They do not joke about dying men. Your ignorance is not an excuse. It is an indictment. Emma watched from the hallway as they were led out, past a gathering crowd of hospital staff who had heard the story. Jared's eyes met hers. The mockery was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified plea. She felt no joy, only a profound sadness. She walked back to the SXCU. Admiral Sheffield was awake, the breathing tube removed. He gestured for her to come close. Emma, he said, his voice a dry whisper. They told me what you did. You fought for me. She took his hand, a hand that had saluted 1,000 times, held the tiller in storms, and now felt fragile in hers. It's my job, sir. He shook his head slightly. No, that was courage. Different thing. He paused, gathering strength. They're taken care of. She nodded. They're begging, she said softly. A flicker of something hard passed over his face. Good. But this isn't about revenge. It's about remembrance. About respect. He squeezed her hand. You have both. In abundance. The story did not end there. A week later, Admiral Sheffield, still in recovery, requested a private ceremony in the hospital chapel. He insisted Emma be there. To her astonishment, a 2-star admiral in full dress uniform presented her with the Navy's Distinguished Public Service Award, one of the highest honors a civilian can receive. The citation praised her exceptional professionalism and unwavering courage in the face of unconscionable adversity, preserving the life and dignity of a national hero. The media covered it, but Emma shunned the spotlight, asking that the focus remain on the Admiral's service. Jared and Mike, publicly unnamed but forever known in their community, transferred to different schools across the country, their lives permanently altered. The fraternity was dissolved. The hospital instituted new, strict policies regarding bystander conduct in trauma zones. In the quiet after the storm, Emma visited the Admiral daily. He told her stories of the sea of men and women under his command, of loss and triumph. He became the grandfather she missed, the mentor she needed. She continued her work at St. Augustine, but now with a quiet authority that no one questioned. She had learned that the world could be cruel and unfair, but that one person's resolve could bend the arc of justice, if only for a moment. She had learned that bullies, no matter how protected they seem, are often standing on a foundation of sand, and that a single wave of truth can wash it all away. The final images of Emma, walking down a hospital corridor at the end of her shift, her badge gleaming. She passes a new batch of rookies, their eyes wide with fear and hope. She offers them a small, knowing smile. She had stared into the darkness, both medical and moral, and had not blinked. And in saving an admiral, she had ultimately saved a part of herself, the part that still believed in heroes, in justice, and in the power of a single, determined heartbeat. From which part of the country are you watching this video?